The winter air carried a sharp chill as Alexander Petrov stepped through the iron gates of the University of Skopje. The ancient buildings stood tall, their stone walls soaked in centuries of history. A faint mist hovered above the courtyard, blurring the outlines of statues dedicated to scholars long forgotten. Alexander had walked this path many times before, but today felt different. His heart was heavy, as though the stones beneath his feet whispered secrets he was not meant to hear. He was a diligent student, admired by many of his peers. Yet behind his quiet eyes lingered a restlessness, a hunger for truth. It was not ambition that drove him, but a sense that beneath the polished image of the university lay shadows no one dared to disturb. At the center of these thoughts stood Professor Dimitar Stoyanov, a man of reputation, revered across Macedonia, known for his brilliance in history and philosophy. Students spoke of him with reverence, as if his lectures carried more weight than the words of any politician. Alexander, too, had once admired him, but admiration had given way to doubt. Small details had begun to unsettle him. A phrase repeated in lectures that did not appear in any textbook. Papers removed mysteriously from the library. Late nights when the light from Stoyanov's office glowed long after the campus was silent. As Alexander crossed the courtyard, his friend Elena approached. Her voice was light, but her eyes revealed unease. "You look troubled," she said. "I am only thinking," Alexander replied, though the truth lay far deeper. The bells of St. Clement's Tower rang out, echoing through the stone corridors. Classes would begin soon, and the students poured into the grand lecture hall. Yet Alexander's step slowed. His gaze lingered on the tall oak doors of Professor Stoyanov's office. Something about them seemed to draw him closer, as if behind that heavy wood waited the answers he had been searching for. But he turned away. For now. The story had begun, though neither Alexander nor the university itself was ready for the storm that approached. The library of the University of Skopje was a cathedral of silence. Rows of towering shelves held manuscripts and volumes that smelled of dust and ink, their spines cracked from centuries of hands searching for knowledge. Alexander had often found comfort here, yet tonight the air seemed heavy, as though the walls themselves listened. He searched for a reference Stoyanov had mentioned in class, an obscure chronicle from the Ottoman era. Yet when he checked the catalogue, the record had been erased. Alexander frowned. He had seen it listed just a week before. Books did not vanish, not without reason. A faint sound startled him. A page turning. He followed the noise to the restricted section, where only staff and professors were allowed. The door stood ajar. Inside, beneath the dim glow of a green-shaded lamp, sat Professor Stoyanov. The old man's hand lingered on a manuscript bound in black leather, its script indecipherable from where Alexander stood. The professor's lips moved silently, reciting lines as though in prayer. His eyes, sharp and burning, reflected the lamplight. For a moment Alexander thought he saw something darker in that gaze, an obsession that bordered on madness. A floorboard creaked beneath Alexander's shoe. The professor looked up sharply. But the doorway was empty. Alexander had vanished into the shadows, his pulse hammering in his throat. Elena noticed his unease the following day. They sat on the steps outside the faculty building as students hurried past. Alexander spoke of the manuscript, of the catalogue that had been altered. Elena listened, her brow furrowed. "You must be careful," she whispered. "My cousin once spoke of him. People say Professor Stoyanov holds influence beyond the university. Some believe he is tied to circles best left untouched." Her words unsettled him further. Macedonia was no stranger to whispers of secret societies, of scholars who strayed too far into the forbidden. Yet to connect such rumors with Stoyanov felt both absurd and frightening. Elena placed a hand on his arm. "If you keep searching, you may uncover more than you wish to see." Alexander said nothing, but in his heart, he knew he could not stop. That evening, a note appeared slipped under his door. No name, no signature, only a message scrawled in a hurried hand. "Stop looking." Driven by both fear and curiosity, Alexander returned to the faculty late at night. The corridors were empty, the marble floors echoing with each step. He had memorized the rhythm of the guard's patrol and slipped through unnoticed. The professor's office loomed at the end of the corridor, its oak doors shut tight. Alexander worked quickly, sliding a thin piece of wire into the old lock. With a soft click, the door yielded. Inside, the air smelled of parchment and candle wax. Bookshelves lined the walls, but his eyes were drawn to a tapestry that hung behind the desk. Worn and faded, it depicted scenes of saints and demons. With trembling hands, Alexander pulled it aside. A narrow door. Hidden. It creaked open to reveal a spiral staircase descending into darkness. He lit a small lamp and stepped down, his heart racing. The air grew colder. Stone walls closed around him. At the bottom lay a chamber carved from the bedrock itself. Shelves held ancient manuscripts bound in leather. Symbols were carved into the walls, twisting shapes that seemed to move in the flickering light. And at the center stood a table, upon which rested a skull, its surface etched with runes. Alexander's breath caught. This was no mere study. It was a shrine. Alexander hurried to copy notes from the manuscripts, his hands trembling. The text spoke of experiments conducted in secret, rituals tied to memory and control, stretching back to the early days of the university. One name appeared again and again. Dimitar Stoyanov. But the dates were wrong. The manuscript spoke of events more than a century ago, yet with details too precise to be coincidence. Could the professor have discovered a way to extend life, to preserve knowledge unnaturally? A noise from above froze him in place. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. He extinguished his lamp and pressed himself into the shadows. The door at the top of the stairs opened. Light spilled down into the chamber. Professor Stoyanov's voice echoed softly. Curiosity is a dangerous gift, Alexander. Alexander's heart pounded. He dared not move, dared not breathe, as the old man descended step by step. Panic surged through him. As the professor's shadow reached the chamber floor, Alexander bolted. He darted past the shelves, up a narrow passage he had not noticed before. The walls scraped against his shoulders as he squeezed through. Behind him, the professor's voice followed, calm yet laced with menace. You cannot run from what you have seen. The passage opened into the old cloisters of the university. Alexander burst out into the night air, gasping. The moon hung above Skopje like a silent witness. He did not return to his dormitory. Instead, he fled across the Vardar River, seeking refuge in the house of an old family friend. Yet even there, sleep brought no comfort. In his dreams, he saw the runes carved upon the skull, glowing red in the dark. Days passed, yet Alexander felt no safety. Students avoided him. Professors who once greeted him now turned their eyes away. It was as though a silent command had spread across the campus. Elena remained his only ally. Together they pieced through his notes, trying to understand the nature of Stoyanov's secrets. She discovered references to societies hidden within the Balkans, groups obsessed with preserving power through forbidden knowledge. One evening, as they studied in a quiet cafe near the stone bridge, Elena froze. A man in a dark coat watched them from across the street, his face hidden beneath the brim of a hat. Alexander felt the walls closing in. He was no longer simply investigating. He was being hunted. Unable to bear the weight of secrecy, Alexander confronted Professor Stoyanov after class. Students lingered in the hall, their chatter fading as tension thickened. Why me? Alexander demanded. Why leave traces? Why let me see what you hide? Stoyanov's eyes glimmered with something between pride and cruelty. Because truth seeks those who cannot resist it. You were chosen the moment you stepped into my lecture hall. Alexander felt the ground shift beneath him. Chosen. The word echoed like a curse. The professor leaned closer. Do not fight what you cannot undo. Join me, Alexander. Knowledge eternal is within your grasp. But Alexander turned away, his choice unspoken yet clear. The city itself seemed restless. Thunder rolled across the mountains, storms gathering above Skopje. Alexander and Elena prepared to expose the professor, gathering evidence from the notes, the manuscripts, and the warnings that haunted them. But their movements were shadowed. The man in the dark coat followed them through the bazaars, across the riverbanks, into the narrow alleys of the old town. Each step felt like walking upon a blade. On the eve of their revelation, Alexander received another note, this time written in the same hand as before. There is no truth without sacrifice. The university bell tolled midnight as Alexander entered the great hall. Torches burned along the walls, though no ceremony had been announced. At the center stood Professor Stoyanov, robed in black, surrounded by figures hooded and silent. The manuscripts lay open upon an altar. The skull, its runes glowing faintly, rested in Stoyanov's hands. "You should not be here," Elena whispered, gripping Alexander's arm. But it was too late. Stoyanov's voice filled the hall, low and commanding. "Tonight, the veil between past and present is broken. Tonight, we continue what was begun generations ago." Alexander stepped forward. His voice trembled, but his resolve was unshaken. "It ends tonight." The hall fell silent. The torches flickered. And as thunder split the skies above Skopje, the final confrontation began.